Hi. The part I want to make today is this part shown down in the lower left hand corner that kind of looks like a fan blade. Some interesting features in this one. We're going to use a pattern to create these fan blades, a pattern to create these circular cutouts, both being circular patterns, and this array of holes in the part will be made with a rectangular array. And to make these individual cutouts, these slots, we'll be using construction geometry. So let's start by sketching on the top plane. We'll accept the defaults. And what I'm going to do is make a circle centered on the two reference planes, and I'm just going to make a dimension of 500. Now that's going to form the sketch for our base part, so we'll say that we're done. And now I'm going to extrude this, and I'm going to extrude to both sides of the top plane, and let's make it fairly thin, something like 20. And we'll say OK. Alright, I'm going to hide the top plane because I don't need that right now. And what I want to do is, again, I'm going to switch my view, and I want to sketch on the top plane. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some construction geometry to allow me to easily fabricate these slots. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a circular sketch and a second one, and that's going to form the information for our outer sketch, and then we'll make one for our inner sketch. And let's go ahead and put the dimensions in that I'm going to want. So this, let me go start from the inside out. The inside one is going to be 310. The second one will be 340. The next set will be 370, and then 400. So I essentially have two circles, each with a 20 unit gap in between these. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on each one of them. They have to be selected, and then you right click and wait for the menu to show up and create and change it to construction geometry. So again, a select, right mouse click, select construction, and do it for the remaining two. So left mouse click to select it, right mouse click to select construction. Alright, now I'm going to make two lines, and middle mouse click, well, I used the button there to turn it off, so middle mouse button, and I'm going to, well, I'll stop here for now, and let's set our dimensions in here. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is change this dimension to 30. And I don't want this dimension over here. I'd rather dimension it from this horizontal line. So I'm going to select this line and the reference line and select the middle mouse button. I'm going to set that to 15 degrees. Now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to select this line, right click, and make it a construction, and do the same for this second one. And now this area that's bounded is going to be the area for my first slot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and select the arc, the width that it's defined by the center, and select that. It's going to click on the center, and then I'm going to come up here and select and select. Now I'm still in the command, so I'll come back and select the center again, selecting that intersection and this intersection. So that forms the two sides of my arc, and now I'll come in here with the line and select that piece and select that one. So that's my closed area for my first slot. Now for the second slot, I am again going to create a line, but now I'm going to come out here, and I guess I only I need to bring it out to the second line. And if I set my dimension, the dimension I want here is again another 30 degrees. But what I'm going to do now is again go back to the arc. Well, let me stop that for a second. Let me go back to select on this line, right click, and make it a construction geometry. Let's get back in here so we can see a bit better. So now I'm going to select the arc again, select the middle, and select this part and that part. Select the center of the circle again, and coming out here, creating those two. And now we'll go to my line, and middle mouse click, and still in the line command, click and click, and middle mouse click. So what I've done now is now I have two areas that are going to be utilized for my slots. Now again, one thing I can show up here is, let me get out of my command, and I want to verify that those are indeed good. Just want to move my 30-degree dimension out of my way. So I want to verify that these are indeed good sections. So I'm going to come up here on the top of the menu bar and select this one to shade all my closed loops. So indeed those are two good closed loops that I can now utilize for creating extrusions, which in this case are going to be extruded slots. So I'll say that I'm done, and I'll utilize the extrude button, and I'm going to flip the direction, remove the material, and just to be proper I'm going to go through all the material, and I'll say that I'm done. So there's my two slots. So now I'm going to turn off the default coordinate system so we can see that at the center of this circle is a center line. Actually, I'm going to turn off the front and right I want to hide that one, and I want to hide this one. So at least now I can see where my parts are. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to select both of these. Not the first extrude, rather, the second extrude, which selects my two slots. And I want to come over here to the pattern tool. And by default, the pattern tool always starts with a dimension that you want to vary. But what I want to do is I want to utilize an axis because we want to make a circular pattern. And I'm going to come in here and select A1, axis 1. And it's going to create a series of dots. Let me go view this from the top so we can actually see, get a good view for what's happening. And what I want to do is this would, by default, the first direction over here, number 1, is the circular direction, the rotation around the axis, whereas the second one, we could make multiple copies of this. Well, I'll show, but we won't leave them in a secondary direction, in this case a radial direction. So the first thing we want to do is I want to make 6 copies at an angle of 60 degrees, and that's going to create 6 copies of my slot. And let's go ahead, well, what I'm going to do is just show you in the second direction. Say I want to make 3 copies of this. Let's make 2 copies of it. Something seems to be wrong with my 3 key. And I can make multiple copies. This would make 2 rows of them. I'll let this stand for the first section, then we'll come back and we'll remove that again. So I'm going to say OK, and there's my slots. 2 sets of them. But let me go back and remove the second slit. So I'm going to come back to my pattern, right click, we'll edit the definition, and I'm going to set this back to a single set of slots, and we'll say that we're done. Alright, well that's created my center pieces here, but now what about this set of holes in the center? Well, let's go back and turn on my front and right datum planes here, and again I want to sketch on the top, and I'm going to start this pattern. I'm going to just define a pattern in this upper quadrant, and then I'm going to use two mirrors to mirror it across. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make a little circle here, and we'll look at our dimensions. So this first dimension, I'm going to set it to be 10. The diameter, I'm again going to set to be 10. And this dimension here, I'll again set to be 10. And that's all I need for right now. I'll say that I'm done. And I will go to my extrude button. Again, flipping the direction, removing the material, and going all the way through the part. And we'll say done. Now again, let's view this from the top. And I just have a single hole right here. So now what I want to do is, that hole is pre-selected, extrude to, so I'm going to come over here to the pattern tool, and now again it selects dimensions, but what I'd rather do is select direction. So the first direction, I'm going to have to put my turn my coordinate axis back on, because my first direction I'm going to want to be, if you can zoom in here, doing the Y direction. And I'm going to select the second direction here, and this will be in the X direction. So again, view it from the top so I can see better what I'm doing. And so we have two default dimensions. Now what I'm going to want to do is I want to have 6 of these in both directions. So I'll set the 6s in both directions, and my spacing, I want them to be 20 units from center to center of my circles. Now you can see that this last circle is going to cut through a bit of my slot. So what I can do is tell the pattern I don't want to create that one instance. So I'll come here and click on it, and it turns white. And then once I've now fully defined my pattern, I'll say OK, and it's going to generate all my particular holes. It's kind of hard to look with all my axes in there, so I'll turn the axes off, and let's look at it in solid view. So that's what I want. So now to make the rest of my pattern, I'm going to mirror this twice. So I'm going to come over here, selecting the pattern of the extrude, come over here to the mirror tool, and I'm going to select this plane, the right plane. Sorry, I chose the wrong one. Let me get out of this. I'm selecting the pattern tool. I want to select the mirror tool, and I want to select this plane to be my mirrored option, and we'll say done. So there's my second set of them. Now what I want to do is I want to select the original pattern and the mirror of that. Actually, I guess I can, yeah, so I want to select the original pattern and this pattern, so I'm going to hold down my control key and select it plus the mirror, and I'm going to right click, and I guess I don't need the mirror selected. So I want to select this and that, right click. Why is it not giving me the group? Maybe it's just this and that. There it is. There's the group. So I'm taking the original pattern and the mirror of it to form a group. So now that's selected. I'll go back to my mirror, and I'm going to mirror across the front plane. And again, we'll say done. So it was a little slow there in creating all the original features, but those are the parts that I wanted to make. So I'm going to go back into the view that just lets me look at the clotheslines. And the last thing I want to do for this part is to create these fan blades down here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to sketch on the front plane. So I'll create a sketch, selecting the front plane. And this is the reason why I extruded in both directions when I made that original extrude. So the fan blades are fairly simple. I didn't bother twisting them or anything, so I'm just going to make a rectangle. and we'll dimension it. Now I think I want to be at least a 200 out from the edge, so I don't cut through any of my slots. My total length here I can make to be 150, and we'll make sure that we split it in half at 75, and let's make the blade itself about 350. Alright, so there's my sketch, and you might notice that this closed sketch icon has stayed on, so it's kind of a handy item to leave on when you're actually making sure that you've made closed sketches. So now I'm going to extrude. I'll say done. I want to extrude this part, and I want to again go on both sides of the plane to make it symmetric, both sides. And again, this one I want to make it fairly narrow, so maybe about 10, and we'll say OK. So that starts the blade section. Now what I want to do to fancy it up, I'm going to select the rounds, and I'll select this edge, and holding the control key down, I'll select the second edge, and since we're not being too precise here, I'll just eyeball it to get myself some nice curvature, and I'll say that I'm done. And I guess I can put a chamfer in here. Let's verify what this dimension is. I don't quite remember, so I'm going to come up here under analysis, measure the length, and let's check out the length of this line. So it's 65, so that's what I'll set up for my chamfer distance. And we're going to come over here to a chamfer, and I want to select this size and come down onto the bottom, again holding the control key down, selecting that side, and we'll come up here and make up in the dashboard and set that dimension as being 65, and we'll say OK. So there's my blade, and now the last thing we want to do, I'm going to hide my planes now, but not my coordinate system. Hide and hide. Oh, I can hide the coordinate system, of course, because my axes are there. Now the one thing, when I turn my axes on, I'm going to see an awful lot of axes, and it's going to be hard to select the actual center of my part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this part and hold the control key down and select this part, so I have all the parts selected. I'm going to right click and I'm going to suppress them, which just turns them off temporarily so I can see what I'm doing. So now I'm going to select the extrude, which made the original part of the fan blade, holding the control key down, selecting the round and the chamfer. Those are all parts of that blade. Right click and select group now. So now I've made a group of these three features, and now we'll select the pattern. Again, I want to make a circular pattern, so I'm going to select an axis, and I think I want to make these 12 of them at a distance of 30 degrees. Viewing it from the top, you can see that I'm about every 30 degrees around my part, and I'll say that I'm done. And there's the part with my fan blades, and now I can come in here and select these parts that were suppressed, right click, and I can resume. So there's my parts. I'm going to turn off all my datum material so I can see it better, and why don't we put it into isometric view for a final look and zoom the part. Okay, well that finishes this example utilizing circular patterns, rectangular patterns, and construction geometry.